Hello there, my friends, and welcome to Fire Engineering Podcast Network in this month's episode of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. This is the podcast dedicated to the great volunteer fire service. Tom Merrill here. Thanks again for joining me. Thanks again for listening in and continuing with this professional conversation that we have each month, talking about building and supporting a professional culture back home in our volunteer fire departments as well as across this great land in our volunteer fire service. And if you like this conversation, which you undoubtedly do, come join me and let's do it in person at FDIC, which is only a few weeks away. FDIC in Indianapolis, April the 20th to the 25th in downtown Indianapolis. I hope to see you there. If you are planning on attending, please, even if you can't make my class, because there's so many great classes, I get it. Let's hook up and meet up at night at the networking event. Shoot me a text, an email. I love to meet the sisters and the brothers and talk about this professional culture. And if you are there and can do it, my class, Professional Development for the Volunteer Firefighter, hour and 45-minute session this year. It's going to be on Thursday, April 23rd, 8:30 till 10:15 for an updated presentation on the things we can all do, no matter our title, tenure, rank, no matter the size of our department, the budget of our department, the membership that makes up our department, things we can all personally do to build and maintain and contribute to a professional culture back home. So love to see you there at FDIC. And hopefully maybe I'll be out your way. If you're not at FDIC, maybe I'll be in your neck of the woods this year. You can head over to my website, theprofessionalvolunteerfiredepartment.com. You'll see where I'm traveling around doing different presentations. And heck, if I'm out your way, I'd love to meet out with you and talk about anything that's on your mind when it comes to our fire service. I'm going to be traveling quite a bit. I think in May, after FDIC, it's off to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, for a gathering there. In June, I'll be at the National Volunteer Fire Council Summit in Virginia. And there was one other one sprinkled in there somewhere, but State Chiefs Conference in New York is in June. I'll probably be heading there, not as a presenter, but just hanging out and taking in the great classes. But I'd love to see you at any of them. So check it out, professionalvolunteerfiredepartment.com. You'll see all my different classes there. So anyway, as you know, I talk all the time about how great it is to go to these conferences, not just for the learning, which is incredible, if you go to classes, which you should be if your agency is sending you, or even if you're spending your own money, but the networking, the meeting of brothers and sisters, in the exchanging of information. And that's how I met my current guest who's going to join us here today. And I don't even know if he remembers it, but we were at the New York State Chiefs Conference. I got there at night, and I was standing in line to check in the hotel, and boom, he stands in line behind me. Never met him before. And we just started striking up a conversation. And that was many years ago. And we run into each other all around the country. We talk quite a bit, text quite a bit, because we think a lot alike. And that came about because we were both at a conference. That friendships, the networking, the exchanging of information, you can't beat it at these events. And that's how I met our guest here today, who has a great presentation that he delivers all over. And if you've never had a chance to take it in, we're going to talk about what's in this presentation, because there's so much good information that's aimed at firefighters everywhere, but frontline officers, especially chief officers, who are often well-versed in strategies and tactics and operations within their department. But a lot of times, for a lot of fire chiefs, the toughest challenges maybe don't come on the fire ground. They come in the meeting room. They come in the budget hearings. They come in the quiet conversations where sometimes local politics can collide with the interests of public safety. So that's what we're going to focus on in this conversation here today. These relationships, these conversations between chief officers and chief leaders in fire departments, they can be very critical. These relationships must be developed for the agency to survive and to be successful. And what I always like to say, and you've heard me say this on this podcast before, contrary to many opinions, about the volunteer fire service. Politics is everywhere and is not limited to the fire service. It's in every organization. And the sooner that officers and chief officers realize, the sooner they realize they can and should be forming these relationships, the better off they'll be at navigating the political spectrum to the benefit of their organization. And that's the question I'm going to ask our guest here. I dare say that in volunteer and even in combination departments, the political pressure may be even more intense than in a paid agency in some ways, because a chief might be leading a neighbor or answering to an elected official that they've known for years, perhaps went to high school with, and making decisions that are going to affect friends and families and voters all at the same time can be a tough thing. So today's conversation is going to be about how these fire service leaders can navigate the reality of politics and how they work with political leaders back home to complete the mission to make their department successful. So I am so happy to introduce Jared Renshaw, a good friend of mine. He is a fire commissioner. He's also a chief officer. I want to talk about that at the Western Berks Fire Department, which is in the great state of Pennsylvania. And he's got over 25 years of experience in both the volunteer and career fire service. And he has helped departments nationwide navigate the complex world of leadership and local politics. Welcome to the show, my brother Jared.
Hey, Tom, thank you for having me. That was a pretty great introduction. I think you covered it all. I think we're good.
It's funny. You and I have talked a lot, and it's always got to get you on the show, And I'm glad we were able to align our schedules to make it work. So thank you for doing that. Yeah. And if you don't mind, let's just start with your background, fire service background. What got you into the fire service? Are you first generation, second generation? Tell us your journey. And then I want to find out about this chief commissioner thing, because I'm a commissioner, used to be a chief. We don't do both. So I want to talk about that too.
I'll go way back just because it really deals with, the topic that we're going to discuss today, the local politics side of things, and, how I got involved with the local political side at a very young age. So my family's all from Carnegie, Pennsylvania, outer ring suburb of the city of Pittsburgh, steel town. Grandfather worked in the steel mill. My mom was a flight attendant. So a lot of times I spent, tons of time at my grandmother's house with my grandparents, my great grandmother, and my grandmother was actually the borough secretary in Carnegie, Pennsylvania for 30 years. So I was down there as a kid. Even in preschool, kindergarten, the bus would come pick me up there for school. So I spent time at her office as a very young child. They had a paid fire chief at the time. Borough council members coming in, the mayor came in, and growing up, I had no understanding of it really. But these were all my grandmother's friends. But as you said earlier about making those tough decisions when somebody could be your next door neighbor, your friend, and that's what these people were. They were basically my grandmother's kind of boss. The mayor owned a bar in town, and the council member, they were always together, all the time. So that was kind of my first thing with the fire service. That's where I kind of fell in love with the fire services, being with their paid fire chief, Larry Collins, always in the mornings before school, eating my cereal in his office, going over to look at the fire engines. And I, first generation of my family to get in the fire service. So the day after I turned 15 years old, I joined the volunteer fire department in South Fayette Township, where I grew up. Worked there was a volunteer there for almost 9 years. And, the politics side that I saw there was that my township had 4 independent volunteer fire companies. And we were run by a 5-member board of township commissioners, so elected officials at the township level. And not that they didn't care about us, but of course, when you looked at the hierarchy of the political landscape, and it's pretty much anywhere, the fire departments, 4 fire departments had a budget like this, but police and public works, their budgets were always bigger. And we had a township liaison, but anytime we really shake the tree, they would just kind of throw some more money at us. Here, go away. Don't bother us. Go do your own thing. And I get it. We were our own independent entities, but we're still designated as the fire service for that township. And then you had folks from the volunteer fire departments that were also township employees. How many towns have the fire chief is also the public works director?
Absolutely.
Or you see that a lot. And I get it. Like, I don't want to see somebody lose their job over the volunteer fire department. Yeah, we love it. We're passionate about it, but it's not what's paying our bills. So I left there. I got hired with the James Island Fire Department in James Island, South Carolina. It's in Charleston County. Um, was there for about 8 years, 9 years. The politics there was interesting. So I worked for what was called a public service district, and they were formed in South Carolina back in like late 50s, early 60s, basically to provide services for non-incorporated areas of different counties throughout South Carolina, um, which was neat. It was it was a PSD, so they provided fire, trash pickup, and sewage. That's all that we had. We didn't have police in our under our spectrum. And we just had those three things that we operated. We operated under a 7 commissioner board that were all elected by the constituents. And politics there is where I really started to get into it. And for the fact of we had some politicians, 4 out of the 7, that were playing some really bad games with the fire department, to where they took our budget one year and they took away raises, which, okay, nobody gets in the fire service to become a millionaire. I was just happy to be doing it for a job, and I loved it. But they took our budget and slashed it to the point of they took station supplies down to $0. They wanted us to buy our own toilet paper for like the fire station. So that was where I don't want to say the love of local politics really started for me, but that's where I really started to see the bad side of things with the local politics, and how a grudge, excuse me, and an agenda really came to the forefront and affected service for the fire department. I give kudos to my leadership there at the time, my fellow firefighters, my fellow officers. We still stepped up and did our jobs 110%, even though we were facing, it was David versus Goliath, pretty much. I left out of there, took a battalion chief's job in California, for a fire department in California City, California. Yeah, it's actually technically named as the city of California City. Real place. Look it up on the map. It's a city out in Kern County, out in the Mojave Desert. So a city of about 15,000 people is the BC. I was actually the second in command. We didn't have a assistant chief or deputy chief within the hierarchy, so I was the second in command. Working for a city government, so that was made up of the mayor and 4 council members. It was a mayor strong form of government. We also had a city manager. I was very fortunate to work for a fire chief that really started to get me ingrained in that political arena. So I was going to council meetings and doing staff presentations. I was going to senior staff meetings. I was doing a lot of the jobs of the fire chief at that level, but he did a great job of working on that succession planning. If he were to leave, I could take over. If he was out of town, I could be in the fire chief role, no problem. And that's where I, kept working at that and worked the political side there. And my wife and I got married in 2014. While we were out there, I met her in South Carolina, and we're both from Pennsylvania. And we really started to have the conversation about having children and wanting to come back to East Coast somewhere. And there was also some things going on within the city. So, what's really different out there was that the city fire and police, where I was in California City, we were funded by a special tax, and it was called Measure A. It was voted on every 6 years by the taxpayers, where every parcel of land was assessed $143, and that paid for fire and police. Well, it gets voted on every 6 years. So guess what happens every 6 years? It doesn't pass. Oh. So then scare tactics come out where, well, now we have to pay for fire and police out of the general fund. So we have to shut down Public Works and the Water Authority and the city park and the city pool. And then they eventually get the tax passed again. And, but it was just a revolving door of that. And I knew that the tax vote was coming up. I was a new kid on the block, even though my job would have been secured, even if the tax didn't pass. It wasn't right for me to stay in that position where there's guys that have worked in that fire department for a very long time. They had small children. I didn't want, I wasn't looking to leave. So that's where kind of looking other places or applying for jobs somewhere else, it wasn't a huge burden on me, but it was the right thing to do, because it wouldn't have been right for me to stay there and somebody else to lose their job that had more time and grade in that fire department. So that's when we started to look on the East Coast, my wife and I, and we found Western Berks Fire Department. I saw they were hiring a fire commissioner. I started to look into the job, and well, I'll throw my name in the hat. I grew up in the other side of Pennsylvania, 4 hours from here. We're in Eastern PA, just outside the city of Reading, and started to read about the department, combination system. It's great. I've been able to do it all volunteer, all career combination. It's been a cool ride. And coming here, I'd never been here until I came here for my interview. And next thing you know, I'm doing on some phone interviews with them, Zoom call interview with them. And then, hey, we want you to come out and interview. And then they offered me the job. So I've been here now over 10 years. I started here in August 3rd of 2015 was my first day of work here.
Wow. So
Yep.
Tell me about this commissioner chief role.
Excuse me. So before I started, they actually had a full-time fire commissioner and a full-time fire chief. So unlike you guys up in New York, the fire commissioner is kind of like similar to like what you have in like New York City or Boston, where it's actually the highest ranking member of the fire department. So it's not an elected official, it's an appointed position by the board of directors that runs the fire department. And when I got hired in, I was hired in as the fire commissioner. They had told me that I had the ability to hire a fire chief if I wanted to. Back then, I was young. I didn't have kids yet, so I had a ton of time to dedicate. And I looked at it about a month or two in, and I was like, well, really the workload, like, let's not hire a fire chief. Let's put that money back into the fire department. I'll just do both roles. And it also kind of made sense to do both roles because the fire commissioner didn't really have fire ground authority unless the fire chief, the deputy chiefs were absent. So me doing both roles kind of allowed me to actually have, per our bylaws, that fire ground command ability, fire leadership, fire ground leadership ability, and then the commissioner side doing all the admin work.
So it's admin on one side of the hat, and the other hat is
I do it all. It's everything. I correlate it to being a CEO of like a company. But it's a great hands-on position. I have volunteer officers. I have career staff, but on the career side of things, that Monday through Friday, I'm the only career officer. So everything kind of falls into my lap. So, the day-to-day operations falls into my lap. Call response falls into my lap. Vehicle maintenance, the training calendar. I mean, I have tons of people that support and do their part as well. But I'm still running calls during the day. I handle our meeting agendas. I do our budgets. I do our audits. So I'm really doing, both operational and administrative side of things.
You're like the CEO of a company that rolls his or her sleeves up to jump in and do whatever work needs to be done.
Right. As my wife says, like I handle the admin side. Then when I go to a fire, I sit in the car, talk on the radio, and make suggestions. That's what my wife says. That's all I do is I make suggestions.
So what's the department like? It's a combination department. Yeah. How many paid members and how many?
So combination department. It's a really neat makeup. So this department was formed in 2009. So we're still fairly young. But what you had before is you had 2 townships and 2 boroughs that each had their own independent volunteer fire companies. And in 2009, the 4 of them merged to become the Western Berks Fire Department. So they became a regional asset within Pennsylvania. And then we have a fire tax that we're fully funded by, so we don't have to do any fundraising whatsoever. My board of directors is made up of our elected officials. So each municipality has a daily say in what we do, how we spend the money. 4 firefighters at large are also on the board. So I report to a board of 8. I know it's weird. It's not an odd number. It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
But technically I'm a pseudo member of the board. I'm like the tie-breaking vote if I have to be. I'm number 9, and unless it involves my employment or anything dealing with my benefits or pay. So we did almost 1,500 runs last year, which is when I started here in 2015. We did about 800. So we have a ton of development coming in. It's a 32 square mile area, about 23,000 residents that we protect, and I have plans out the wazoo that we're reviewing on a regular basis. So we're seeing a ton of development and growth in our area. So, these guys that made the Western Berks Fire Department and had the forethought to do a regional fire agency. And, we all know the lack of volunteerism, and it's not a fault to the volunteers. We know people just aren't doing it. We know that it's a struggle, and it's not a PA thing. It's not a New York thing. It's an across the country thing.
Sure.
And they had that forethought to merge this department together and pull all the resources and all the assets. And, I look at what we're able to do nowadays with this merged fire department that the 4 independent fire companies wouldn't be able to have done back then.
How many members do you have?
So we have 7 career, including myself, and our career firefighters work Monday through Friday. So they're 6A to 6P on staggered shifts. So we'll staff 2 stations during that time. Basically, when the volunteers are at work, the career firefighters are in the firehouse. And then on the volunteer side, I think we already have 4 applicants this year, and it's only February on the volunteer side. But, it's hit or miss. You could have 40 sets of gear on the rack, but, you have that core group, that 10 to 15 core group that show up on a regular basis type of thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
So are you basically on call 24/7 running this department?
Yeah, I live in the town adjoining our jurisdiction. Yeah. So I am literally a 2-minute drive away from one of my borders. And my phone's always on, the pager's always on. If it's work, I'm showing up. If it sounds like Sunday night, I ran a cardiac arrest. It was up. It wasn't far from where I live. I said, I was awake. It was like 11:30 at night. I'm like, I'll go. So I try to do that to, I look at it, I'm being paid for this position. Not that I need to justify my position or, yes, I always want to show that I'm doing a good job and I'm giving 110%. Right. But hey, if the residents are paying for me to be here or to be on call, I want them to get their money's worth out of me. So I know last year I was on, I think I did like over 500 calls myself that I responded to. So that's during the day, that's nights, that's weekends. As long as it's not interfering with crazy family life stuff, I try to be there.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. That's what I love about all the different guests I have on the show, is just hearing how the fire service is structured and organized throughout the country. And as we dive into our subject here today, you certainly have been well exposed to all different makeups of government and leadership, which is great. So would you agree with this statement that most fire chiefs say the hardest part of the job isn't the fires, it's the local politics?
Yeah. Tom, let's face it, going to fires is the easy part, right?
Yeah.
Myself and one of my deputies, we say to each other all the time, usually it's going to fires is the easy part. Dealing with people is the hard part.
Sure. Yeah.
And especially, your members, your employees, that's always one of the most difficult things as personnel management. But on the politics side, and for me, it's even a little different, just to elaborate. So I have my board, I have those 4 elected officials, 1 from each municipality, but I still go to their municipal meetings. I still talk to their municipal managers. So when you break it down, it's not 4 politicians I deal with, it's 20. And, it's interesting because my 2 townships don't want the same thing out of the fire service. The boroughs don't want the same thing. The townships and the boroughs definitely don't want the same things. So you're basically trying to appease 4 different municipalities all the time. Yeah. That's kind of how it works.
Right. But it's so important, isn't it, to recognize the need to develop these relationships with government officials, the need to do what you're doing, to go out and sit in on the meetings. But there's others that maybe say a chief shouldn't be involved politically, or they should stay out of it. But how important is it to stay in touch with these officials?
Right. Well, you have to walk that fine line. You have to walk that fine line between, they're responsible for your budgeting. They're responsible for your money. They're, responsible for your employment. You have to make sure that you're not falling into being that pseudo politician. There still has to be that definitive line, but it is important. You have to be present. The only time that elected officials, I've seen it throughout my career where people, we needed more money, so we went to the township meeting to ask for it. Well, how many other meetings did you go to this year? Well, none. You just can't show up when you want more money. Or when something goes wrong to defend yourself or give your side of the story, you have to be present. I'm not expecting you to loiter at City Hall or, hang out there all the time, but you have to be present. You have to be there. They have to know who you are, know your name. Your face, your name is being assimilated with that fire department. When they think of the fire department, they think of you as the fire chief.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think they're reluctant to do it? I know my personal opinion from the volunteer side is, in this day and age of strap volunteers, everyone is so busy just keeping up with the training, the going to the calls, and doing what's got to be done at the firehouse. You mentioned 4 different meetings, I think, that you go to. I know there's a lot of chiefs out there thinking, I don't have the
Yeah.
time. I don't have the
Yeah.
interest.
Well, let's face it. Municipal meetings are typically very boring. They're boring. We only get a small snippet of time where we're able to talk. I do the activity report monthly that goes to all my elected officials, that even if I'm not there, that information that I want to be shared with them still comes out. But I get my time under my staff report at my 4 meetings to speak. Well, let's face it, after 45 seconds, all their eyes are glazed over. They're bored. They're bored with me. They don't want to hear it anymore. I have up to a minute to really kind of wow them on what we're doing, be that ad executive and sell my fire department to them and talk about what I'm doing. But the meetings overall are boring. And some of them could last 2 or 3 hours. And I get it. Like, luckily my wife is so cooperative and picks up that slack with getting the kids to sporting events or Cub Scouts or whatever it may be. But hey, in households where both parents are working all the time or working late shifts, you can't expect somebody that already ran 5 calls that week and went to training and is going to go to the fundraiser to also show up to a municipal meeting. It may only be once a month, but guess what? That's still another night a month.
Another night.
You're committing away from your family.
Right. Yeah. But it's so important to do that. When you talk to these officials, are there some misconceptions that elected officials have about the volunteer fire service or combination fire service? I imagine they need to be educated, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the biggest downfall that I see, well, 2 things: Google and social media. Because I've already dealt with this throughout my career where, the fire chief's supposed to be the subject matter expert, right? We're supposed to be the one that our elected officials come to when they have a question about the service that's being provided or what went on at a call. Well, some people don't choose to do that. They choose to Google it or go to social media. And I always say, especially when it comes to social media, when a fire department gets into hot water, say there's a house fire and people start complaining, well, it took them too long, or they lost the whole house, or they let it burn down to the ground. Well, that's their perception. As the fire service, we know the reality, but that's their perception, and we can't, argue that with them.
Yeah.
But that's where it's really difficult to, sometimes talk to them because they don't want to come to us for whatever reason. I dealt with that with previous board members. They chose everything in the world not to speak with me. In one of my municipalities, they would go to Google, they would contact ISO directly, they would go to this person, but they never wanted to contact me directly. And it's almost like, what, are you afraid of the truth? Are you afraid of, me telling you that, hey, we have to buy a new fire engine or add a new fire station? Or are you afraid that I'm going to tell you something that's going to cost you more money as an elected official? They don't want to hear that. Again, we're in that pecking order. Unfortunately, oftentimes we're down at the bottom in most places.
Yeah. So I could see easily how there's so many misconceptions out there about how the fire service is structured, how the fire service is run, the needs of the fire service. And if they're going to, let's go to the latest trend, they're getting their information from AI. AI's telling them everything you want to know, right?
Right. But the education side is huge. And again, we're given a very small amount of time to talk. When you look at, depending on how local ordinances are or how you're governed, you may only have 3 minutes to speak, even if you're given that. What are we going to cover in that 3 minutes? And if you don't have the relationship with your town manager or, whoever it may be that is going to filter that information down to your elected officials, if the relationship isn't there, how can you send them anything?
Sure.
How can you give them data or statistics or an explanation on what's going on? It's kind of impossible. I could send it up the borough where my headquarters station is located. They have 7 council members and a mayor. I could send all 7 of them information. Who's going to read it?
Yeah.
They all have full-time jobs. Like, what's the fire department complaining about now, or what do they want now, or what are they doing now? Like, the education side is huge. It's just getting that ability to educate is often the problem. And you can't wait till the last minute to educate. So
is your point? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But if you want to buy a new engine, you can't go the month where you need to buy it. You have to start that education, months in advance. And I've often found it's easier to educate our residents by telling your story on social media, having town hall meetings, just talking to residents when you're out I do it all the time. We go on calls. I tell residents all the time about what you pay, because most of them don't look at their tax bills, right? It's paid out of escrow. So I tell them what you pay for a fire tax, and I'd say you're usually paying less for us than you are for trash pickup.
Absolutely.
So educate, your citizens. They can come be your cheerleaders and talk on your behalf and fight on your behalf in front of your elected officials.
Yeah. I remember hearing Alan Brunacini was the king of that. He would be at meetings all over the town talking to the residents, and then when he needed something, they would fill the chambers. And I remember someone doing a funny imitation of an elderly resident in a wheelchair on oxygen, taking their oxygen mask off, going, Bruno, put their oxygen mask on, take a hit of the oxygen, Bruno, at one of the board meetings, and he got what he wanted. But
think about it. That pressure from them goes a long way.
Yeah. Is there a point where a fire chief stops being just the fire chief and becomes more of a political leader? Like, whether they want to or not, is there a point they might need to do that?
So I think that's a two-sided question. And what I mean when I say that is you have the fire chief that forgets why they're the fire chief. You have the fire chief that completely forgets about their fire department, the service delivery, taking care of the residents. And now all they're doing is just trying to appease the elected officials because they're worried about, I get it. It's a self-preservation mode. You're worried about your own job and you want to make sure that your job is okay. So you want to keep your elected officials happy. But in that instance, you're not fighting for your people anymore. And on the other side of it, you can become that political leader where if you continue to show that your fire department is doing a good job and you're doing a good job and you're pushing the agency forward, you get those residents to speak up on your behalf. And, you could be that person that, you are the subject matter expert. They are going to look at you. You do have that influence within your local government. Not in a bad way, but you have that influence. And I always think about the fire chief. It was up in New Hampshire. I think it was Londonderry or New Londonderry. And remember, this made a lot of waves on social media, I think last year. But he's the one that stood up at the town meeting and basically resigned because they weren't giving him the money to do what they wanted, and the town wanted extra people hired, and the town council said no, and this guy spoke up about that and spoke up about what's best for his department, what's best for his residents, and he resigned. But he got a ton of support for that. I said, I think it was Londonderry or New Londonderry. I can't remember it 100%. I've watched it, and it's inspiring. But that guy, just that couple minute speech that he did, he became a political leader in that town.
Wow.
Basically just by pointing it out. So yeah, there's that one side where it's kind of bad, and the other side where it's really good, where it's that balancing act.
Yeah, it's a balancing act for sure. All right, so let's say we're a fire chief who's new and wants to begin to forge the relationship, or maybe it's a fire chief that's been in office for a while and is listening to us and realizes, okay, I gotta get better at this, or I gotta start doing this. Do you have any tips or strategies on how to maybe break the ice?
Well, let's start it at the beginning. So just like every time that bell goes off, we start our size up, right? Think about it. Up there in the frozen tundra of Snyder, New York, where you are, when you guys get a fire.
Really? It's 15 degrees right now. Everything's good.
But you guys get a fire, pager goes off, guys are responding to the firehouse. You already start your size up, right? You start thinking about the street where you're going,
Yeah.
the building
Yeah.
construction type, what's on that street, what the builder did there. There's so many things running through your mind, right? We do that for every call. Then we get there and we continue that size up. It's ongoing. Well, it's the same on the political side. So if you're that fire chief sitting at home that doesn't really have that connection, well, you got to start your size up. So you have to start, basically looking into things on your elected officials first. Get an understanding of who they are. And there's so many avenues you could go with it. So the big one is meeting minutes. If you're able to get them online, that's the best way to do it because you could peruse so many of them in a really quick fashion. But go on and see your meeting minutes and see what your elected officials have said about the fire department. See how they have voted in the past. But it also gives you an insight to kind of how they sway when it comes to what's important to them. Are they always pushing things for Parks and Rec? Are they pushing things for police? Are they pushing things for public works? It'll give you that good understanding. And check Facebook, check social media. Like if they ran a campaign and they had a Facebook for their campaign, go on there and look at the posts, look at the comments, see if there's a post about the fire department, go and read the comments on what citizens may have asked them or what their replies were to citizens and get an understanding of who they are and how they view the fire service. The other best way to do it is just to be present. So like, hey, if your municipal meeting starts at 7:00, get there early. Go up, introduce yourself. Make sure you don't look like a schlup. You don't have to wear a tuxedo, but go in and be presentable.
Look professional.
Right, professional. Go in and look the part. Go in and look the part as the fire chief, and just go up and start introducing yourself. If you're the new, hey, how are you? We don't really get to talk that much. How are you doing? Hi, how are you? How are you? Shake hands, introduce yourself, give out a business card if you have them. If you have that town manager, just drop them an email. See if you could set up a time to meet, see if you could set up a time to talk, or maybe just correspond via email or over phone and just kind of lay it out there. Hey, I want to know how you guys view our fire service. Are you happy with the fire service? Are you happy with what we do? What do you want to see from us? It can't hurt to ask those questions. It can't hurt to ask what those expectations are of your elected officials on you. That's what we want to meet, right?
Yeah, and you know what? You might get asked by them, what can we do for you?
Right. How can we help you? How can we support you more? Like, oh, I saw you guys are like, if you don't go to the, let's see, like, like those big thermometer things that they have for like raising funds, right?
Oh, yeah. Right.
You have one of those out in front of your firehouse, and we're trying to raise $1 million for a new fire engine, because this is 2026, right? And that's what a new fire engine costs nowadays. We're trying to raise $1 million. And if you're trying to do that all on your own without any type of support, or even if your municipality does give you money, they may be giving you the same amount of money that they gave you back in 1985. It may have never changed if you don't ask for it. But if they start to see that, and then if you show up, hey, what's the thermometer out front? What are you guys raising money for? Well, why are you raising money for that? Then you explain, well, we're replacing a 1985 Seagrave. It's 2026. Do you drive a 40-year-old car? Should we be driving a 40-year-old fire truck? So yeah, it could open up doors. Just be present, being nice, being presentable, looking the part, shaking hands. They always say, like, what's the thing with politicians? Like shaking hands and kissing babies, or you kind of have to do it a little bit.
Yeah, you can't retreat to your office and stay there. That's for sure.
It's impossible. To get your department to move forward in any way, shape, or form, you have to get out from outside of your office. You can't expect it.
Even if you have this relationship with the current board, I dare say if a new, boards are changing every couple of years, and in a lot of areas there's term limits now for the politicians. That's the way it is in my area. I dare say that you might have had a good relationship with the outgoing people. Well, don't forget now there's people coming in. Same thing, size them up, get to know them. Don't be afraid to stop in, knock on the door, introduce yourself, go to that first those meetings and introduce yourself.
Yeah, especially if they're new, and ask them to carve out a time to come down to the firehouse. Come down and check out our operations. Come down and see what we're doing. Come down and meet our people. Besides the fire chief, it's always important for me. I love to, when I'm out in the public, to be able to introduce, my officers and my firefighters to, people in our community. Get those other names affiliated with your agency, with your elected officials. But that's also, where you kind of have to walk that fine line a little bit. When you asked earlier about becoming that politician, and, you always want to have that good working relationship with your elected officials, but you have to not always align 110%. Like, think about it. You align with this group, and then this group runs against them and wins. Well, guess what? You're affiliated. You could be losing your job or losing your vote or lacking support for the fire department. I just saw it happen here with another agency in PA. They were pushing to hire more career firefighters within their combination system. And the chief did all this work, and the outgoing board voted to basically go ahead and, let's hire these people, Well, the new board coming in January meeting said, nope, we're opening up the budget. We're putting a stop on this hiring. We want a consulting firm to come in, basically to reaffirm what the fire chief has already told them. And the fire chief ended up resigning. All within a month span of, but this new board got elected and came in, and he just said, yeah, I can't work for these people, because he was so, on that other side. I get it. Like, politics gets nasty. Think about all the mudslinging that goes on during a campaign. It gets nasty.
How does a chief avoid staying out of that? For example, let's say during election season, when you're asked as a chief or commissioner or even a town employee to put up a political sign for somebody to support somebody's campaign, is there a professional way to handle that?
I've had, when I lived, but my wife and I, we moved, to a neighboring jurisdiction, a couple of years ago, but I was living within my first due. And I've had, people even from outside of my local level of politics, like a state rep or state senator, ask me to, well, hey, we want to put a sign in your front yard. Because again, the relationship and networking, knowing these people, I've always said no, just for the fact of, I've wanted to stay neutral as the fire department. And I don't want to, if I have a sign for a Democrat in my front yard, my neighbor across the street who's a Republican may hate me, or vice versa.
Yeah.
I want to stay as neutral as possible. And, it's just really just telling them, hey, sorry, I can't endorse any candidate, because
they want you to come to the fundraiser.
I'm working, I'm working for you right now, but I may be working for this person next month. And think about it, if I had person A's sign in my front yard, but person B won, and especially I have a take-home vehicle. I don't really want a political sign in my front yard with a fire department take-home vehicle, because guess what? Somebody's going to take a picture of that. They're going to be mad about it, and they're going to put it on social media.
Yeah.
Why is local fire chief supporting XYZ candidate?
It gets into that, when are you a politician versus when are you the fire chief?
Right. And I think
that could be uncomfortable. Those could be uncomfortable conversations, if you decline the donation or decline the invitation to the fundraiser.
Yeah. You just kind of have to. You always have to remember you're a fire chief first, and keep your department first, and keep your service, keep the residents first. Because, again, unfortunately, that local level, any level of politics gets nasty and dirty.
Is there a right time to ask for things you need? I think I'm right here. You want to size people up. You want to get to know them. You want them to get to know you. You want to have pleasantries and, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're working. Is there a right time to go and ask for things?
So the right time is always in the honeymoon phase. Think about it. New fire chief coming in, you have a honeymoon phase, right? New board coming in, you have a honeymoon phase where people are still trying to figure everybody out. They're like here in PA, we have a lot of classes for borough council members, township supervisors, where they can actually learn about how local government works. There's no mandate to take those classes. So unless you've been attending meetings and understand how it works, your first meeting can be the first one you ever go to. You're still trying to figure stuff out. And that's really the time. That's the perfect time to ask, is the honeymoon phase. Because who says no to public safety? You know, if you have a good turnout of residents and you as a fire chief can really articulate and advertise, be that ad executive for your fire department and say, this is why we need this, that's the perfect time to do it. But once you get out of the honeymoon phase, you know, the right time to do it is not at the last minute. Yeah, you know, if you're on a calendar year budget and you need a budget increase in January, well, don't go to the December meeting and ask for more money. You know, they've already worked on all the budget stuff. They've already figured things out. They've already figured out your millage rate. You need to start that process sooner than later. You know,
Yeah.
you got to give them the data. You have to give them time to digest what you're giving them. And, you know, of course, there's going to be tons of follow-up questions and follow-up meetings. You have to do it sooner than later. But yeah, to strike while the iron's hot, the honeymoon phase is the time to ask for everything. When whoever's new, man, that's the time to do it. But again, once the honeymoon phase ends and that door gets slammed shut, now then it's down to business. And it's, you know, you got to be strategic on it.
So how do we get into that phase? So the honeymoon phase comes to an end, but you still need things. So how do we get into that phase of things?
Well, you know, that's where your department has your planning down, right? What they're going to do and when they want to do it or when they want to accomplish it. And, you know, you just have to sell it to your elected officials. You know, when the doors slant, you know, that's when they're going to start to scrutinize budgets and they're going to start to scrutinize expenditures, you know, even down to the nickel. You know, when they start to get an understanding of how that government side works, or use the fire chief coming in, if you're new, like, you know, that's when you start to get scrutinized.
Yeah.
But that's where you just have to be blunt and forward and honest with them on why you need what you need. You know, you have to be, and I said it already, you have to be an ad executive for your fire department. You have to know how to sell your agency to your elected officials and to the public.
Do you think the mantra that a lot of agencies fall back on when there's cuts or programs aren't that are the fire company wants certain programs that maybe that aren't funded, that are then cut out of the budget or not funded in the following budget? Do you think the line "people are going to die" works? Because you see that all the time. There's always the threat of people are going to die if you don't do this.
I mean, you know, hey Tom, you know, there's anything's possible, right?
Yeah.
You know, anything is possible. You know, I think whenever there are cuts made, you have to be realistic with what the cuts are. We can't what if it. You know, oh well, you cut our training budget so a plane could fall on a train tomorrow. Like we can't. You know, we have to be realistic on what. Okay, if you cut our budget by this amount, like when I talked about working at James Island, when our budget got slashed, you know, they came in with the highlighter and just, you know, oh nope. You know, we had to be realistic. Our training budget was cut to zero. EMS supplies were cut to zero. You know, we had to be realistic with, well, we can't restock med supplies now. We can't send people to training. You know, and you can't send people to training. So that means these people can't promote. So we're going to be short captains, or we're going to be short engineers, or our ISO rating may be affected because we can't complete training burns, you know, fire department training burns and getting our time in because our training budget has been slashed. You know, I get that people want to make that big splash right away and throw things out there that are eye catching, but we can't be fear mongers.
Right.
Say that, you know, people, it's a possibility. Of course it's a possibility. If you close firehouses, that's a good possibility, right? You close firehouses in a city that runs a ton of fires. Is that a possibility? Oh, yes, it is.
100%.
So it's even a possibility in small town USA, but we can't be fair. We have to be able to provide them that concrete factual information. We can't what if it. We just have to give them, well, if you cut this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. And it's part of being a good fire chief, a good fire commissioner, staying in contact. In addition to the political leaders, is it a good idea to stay in touch with the community too? Mm-hmm. I think it is.
Oh, yeah.
And you can even say calmly, I don't think acting irrationally and emotionally is always the right approach, even though it's easy to justify why you're doing it. But to just simply say, here's the facts. Here's what we wanted to do. Here's the reasons why. It wasn't it was denied, it wasn't funded, whatever the case may be. Here's the repercussions. Here's what we can do for you. Here's what we can't do for you.
Yeah.
Here's what
It's,
might
and
happen.
like, hey, we don't want to put the blame back on the elected officials. You know,
Right.
say we had our right. We have our, if we use, say, fire prevention, all right, and well, that fire prevention budget gets cut, so we can't go to the schools during fire prevention week, and we can't have our open house. We can't buy the coloring books and the plastic fire helmets. We'll just use that as the example.
Sure.
That's that concrete factual thing telling the community, well, sorry, we're not going to be at your kid's school. You can't come to the open house, but we'd still be able to have them stop by the firehouse for a tour, or we could run out to your kid's birthday party with the fire truck. But we don't want to say, well, we can't do this because they over there cut our budget. We don't want to finger point because, again, you don't know in the community who knows who.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to do is finger point, and then you start bad mouthing an elected official. Say it's the elected official that talked the most during that budget time and really said, no, we're going to slash the fire department's fire prevention budget. They could know that person. They could be a family member. Like, you never know. You have to.
People are going to dig in. They're going to dig in.
You just got to do your job. But
should you be ready to answer the why? Like, why can't you come to my school?
This is why. Sorry, we don't have the money for it this year. We hope to get it back in the budget next year, but we can do this for you. And again, the community relations, like I love it. Like I said, there's a book by a guy named Dr. Barry Barnes, and he wrote the 10 things I learned about business I learned from the Grateful Dead. And he talks all about the Grateful Dead's business principles and practices. One of the things that they highlight in the book as one of the principles is leave a lasting impression. And I expect that out of my people. Of course, we're firefighters. We're always going to go above and beyond, right? We could get called to the most mundane thing in the world, like, oh, my thermostat is stuck. Can you help me? What are we going to do? We're going to go figure it out, right? But we want to leave those lasting impressions with everybody. We want to make sure, it's the worst day of their life. And of course, that's a huge sliding scale, right? This person's worst day is their house fire, but this person's worst day is they had a carbon monoxide detector that's 20 years old that activated. But we want to leave that lasting impression, with everybody that we encounter and everybody that we talk to. And again, so they could be our cheerleaders, But again, doing it the professional way, like we're talking about with why we can't do this for you, but this is what we can do, or we hope to do it next year. We don't want to fearmonger. We don't want to point. We don't want to place blame. We just want to, hey, this is what we could still do for you as the fire department, and being professional about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways, the fire service already has one up on a lot of other agencies. We're up here in most cases. Yep. And the last thing you want to do is destroy that. People expect us to be a certain way and behave a certain way. We have that image already.
Right. Think about it. How many people, like the fire service, I call 911. I'm up. My front door's open. Come right on in. Oh, here, I'll wait outside while you monitor my home. Here, go walk around the inside of my house. Who else does that?
Right.
That's
or
not
I'm a business owner, but I'm in Florida. It's okay.
Right, here's the combination. Hey, use the Knox box key and go on in there. Who else does that? And I always like to use the term, firefighters were pillars of our community. Which we are. Most even your largest cities to your smallest towns, the fire department, they're big in those communities. They hold stuff together. Fire departments, especially in small town USA, that was the central gathering point. That's where everything went on. I look at my firehouse from my headquarters as I'm sitting in right now. This station was built in 1961, and they used to have this really cool old firehouse, single engine bay, the bell on top, built in the 1800s, out here on Penn Avenue. But this station was built around a stage because the fire company owned the land, and this is where they had their fair every year. So the stage was here way before the fire station ever was. But this was that central point. Everybody looked forward to the fair every year. We do it all. We don't say no. Every time there's a new type of issue in this world, who's going to take care of it? The fire department is. We go from fighting fires to, okay, now you have to cut people out of cars. Now you have to do hazmat. Now you have to do water rescue, tech rescue, weapons of mass destruction. There's fire departments here in PA, like Allentown. They actually are the city's bomb squad. The fire department is. We're the jack of all trades. Ultimately, it always.
Remember when CO detectors first came out?
Yeah, it falls back, and it's not a knock in our public safety partners in police or EMS, but we're the ones that are going to do it. And it doesn't matter if you're a career department combination or all volunteer, it falls back to us. We are those pillars. We are looked at to be the fix-all of everything that happens within our areas.
So what else can we do to help build this political relationship and navigate these political landmines? What else would you tell our listeners?
So we can't be afraid to be open-minded. That's one of the first things, is that, firefighters, we're all type A personalities, right? And we all got some pretty big egos, right? Our fire department's the best, or we've been doing it the best for a long time. Thank God for, well, sometimes social media is a good thing and a bad thing. Social media is so great because we could see what's going on in our fire service across the country. Things that I could see what's going on in Selkirk, Idaho, just because I check out social media. I never would have known what they did 15 years ago. But as we look at it, you see so many stories with fire departments that are getting shut down, or they're closing, or they're under the microscope because, oh, well, we don't want to open up our books. We don't want to show them our financials. It's still taxpayer money. Oh no, we got to hold it here. Like they're so afraid to have something. I mean, if there is something going on, then by all means get caught and have it addressed in a court of law. But we can't sit here and, oh no, we're not going to show you our books. Our books are fine. We've had the same treasurer for 60 years. We can't show you our books. Like to have that open mind and to be more open, again, come outside of your four walls, not be afraid to, and be open-minded, also not to be afraid to show your deficiencies. If you need help, you have to ask for it. If you're struggling financially to provide the service, all right, you got to wave the white flag and be like, hey, sorry, we can't do this anymore. I just saw it. There was a fire department in York County here in PA right before the new year. They started to have stuff on social media where they came out and said, sorry, we can't do this anymore. All volunteer department, long-standing tradition, like 100-something years of service. They just came out and said, we don't have the membership to provide the service anymore. Sorry. Yeah. And you can't fault them for doing that. They basically said, hey, we're waving the white flag. It took a lot of guts and a lot of, they put their pride aside, they put their ego aside, and they did what was right for their community. That's where we have to look at it. We just can't look at everything from one dimension when it comes to working with our elected officials. We really have to be open-minded and all-encompassing and be able to accept that constructive criticism.
And sometimes. I dare say that this might be hard. This is actually can be hard to understand. I dare say, you know what? You got to keep an open mind sometimes to their idea too.
Yeah, they may have a good one.
We get so defensive if it's not our idea, right? And if they have different plans, how to restructure or how to do something, that can be tough.
That one of the coolest things about the local level of politics is, most of these folks are all volunteering for these positions, or they receive a very small stipend.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the volunteer fire service, right? You have so many people from so many different backgrounds and walks of life. Think about it. In your volunteer fire department, you usually have an electrician, a plumber, somebody to help you build your deck.
Thinking of them right now.
Right. You have all those people, but it's the same at your local level. There's people that, get involved in politics for a myriad of reasons. There's people that truly care about where they live and they want to make it better. You have people that, well, their dad was a politician, so they're doing it. You have, well, I was bored, so I thought I'd do it too. Or, or those that have a personal agenda. Yeah. But you do get people on that want to make it better. And, there's some people that, they have doctor in front of their first name, or they have Esquire after their last name. Like, you have some people that come in that are pretty smart, and they may not have an understanding of how to put a fire out or how to cut somebody out of a car, but maybe they can look at things from a different financial aspect to help the fire department, or from a different, operational administrative aspect that they could try to help you out in. And that's, again, about being open-minded and welcoming that criticism, or like you said, welcoming those suggestions.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep an open mind. What else? Anything else?
Um, you just have to be present. You don't have to hang out in City Hall all day long. You don't have to loiter, but you have to be present. And, you have to remember that you're the face of your agency. So you're being looked at 24 hours a day. And that means that Sunday morning you go to the grocery store, you may not be in a fire department vehicle or have a fire department uniform on, but in small town USA, people know you're the fire chief. And they're going to want to come up and talk to you. I know it's going to drag out your shopping trip a little bit longer. You just want to get home and watch football, but take the time to talk to them. Take the time. They're your constituents. You're not an elected official. You're not a politician, but take the time to talk to people. And again, in that public eye nowadays, with everybody having a camera on their phone,
Yeah.
you're representing your agency. You can't go out and do dumb stuff. You can't make dumb posts on social media and delete it and think nobody saw it, because guess what? Everybody saw it.
Yeah.
And if you set those expectations high at the top for yourself, it's going to filter down through your organization, which is a great thing. That's why I love my people here, because they're fantastic for that. We've had haters try to start an argument on our department Facebook page. And I've had people in my department that have showed so much restraint, because, I wanted to light this person up on Facebook, but they have shown so much restraint to not get involved, where it just dies off and we don't have to worry about a fight or an argument. So just, you're under that gun 100% of the time. You could be on vacation in Mexico, but guess what? You're still your area's fire chief.
Yeah. Yeah. Any personal stories, whether successful or maybe not so successful, that you've either read about, heard about, or experienced yourself?
I'm gonna give you a story that it's from my own personal thing, my own personal cachet here of what I did. So I was working at a fire department, not where I am now, somewhere else. I'm not going to name names. And we were in dire need of new portable radios. The ones we were using didn't even have emergency buttons. They didn't have identifiers. We needed new portable radios. And we were able to secure a grant to buy all new portable radios. Well, we go to the meeting and it gets tabled. Now, we got a grant, 100% non-matching grant to buy all these new radios. And it gets tabled at the meeting. I did a whole staff presentation on this, on why we need these. And I was furious. I was mad because A, we worked our butts off to get the grant. And then B, they don't want to vote on it because they're worried about, well, in 10 years, we have to replace them. What's that going to cost us? Well, let's not worry about 10 years. Let's worry about now and the safety of our people and giving them a reliable portable radio that is their lifeline inside of a building fire. So I sat there and I devised a plan. And I didn't tell the fire chief about it. I just did this on my own. So I went to the one council member's house with the portable radio. We had one already. And I sold him on it by going to his house on a Sunday afternoon, hanging out with him in his garage for about 4 hours till he finally said, yes, I'll vote yes on this radio. Then another council member used to play cards every Friday night at the local American Legion. And I told my wife, I'm going to the American. Now, I'm not a huge drinker, but I was like, honey, I'm going to the American Legion tonight. And she's like, why? I'm like, I got work stuff to do. She's like, at the American Legion? I'm like, don't worry about it. So I went in there. I sat at the bar for 2.5 hours and waited for this person to come out from the card game. Sat down at the bar. I bought him a drink. I said, let's talk. And he said, what do you want to talk about? I said, I got business to talk to you about. He's like, we're not talking business here tonight. I said, no, I want to know why you tabled the radio purchase. I was like, this is BS. I used some other words, but I was like, this is crap. I said, this is a lifeline. I said, I did my due diligence to get this municipality off the hook for paying for him. $80,000 worth. It's all being paid for by somebody else. And you voted to table it. And I have a feeling you're going to vote no, not to accept this grant. And I sat there and ragged on this person for about 2 hours till he finally agreed. And next meeting, it passed 5-0. So, looking back on it, excuse me, Tom, it's one of those things where, I should have told the fire chief what I was doing first, but I felt it was so important for the safety and well-being of our people to kind of stick my neck out there. Should I be sitting there going to somebody's house and going to a bar and talking business? I mean, there's no quorum. So what's not to say I can't talk to business? I was also a resident. I was there not only in my position, but also as a resident. But was it the right place to talk about it? Was it the wrong place? I don't know, but I got the radios, and I knew that my guys were safe after that.
What would you have done, and what advice would you give if after those 2 hours you still didn't have the vote?
I would just keep on them. I would just keep on them. I don't want to say to the point of pestering or nagging, but I would just keep on them. I had 2 weeks till the next council meeting, and I knew I had to do something in that 2 week time span to get this done. I was proud of myself for putting this grant application together and working the angles and working with state rep, state senator, county people to get the grant.
Yeah.
Was it going to be a feather in my own cap? Yes, it was. But knowing that my people were going to have good radios was the paramount thing for me to do and to accomplish. And I just would have kept on them. Gave them more information, did a demonstration. Come by the firehouse. Let's do a demonstration on, okay, if you're entangled, how do you call for help? Well, there is no emergency button on that radio. The thing is so old. But if I hit this one, it'll say who it's assigned to, what their riding position was, puts out an alert, lets everybody know. I would have went to those next steps to let's do a demonstration, or let's talk to neighboring agencies, or let's talk about case studies. Let's talk about NIOSH.
Yeah.
How many times those NIOSH reports, communication is always a big one in a lot of NIOSH reports.
Very good. Very good. So we've been going for almost an hour now, and I wanted to toss out a few questions at you. I might catch you off the guard here a little bit.
I like it. Let's do it.
These were provided to me by some listeners that knew I was going to be doing a show like this. And I just want to fire them off in rapid fire. And
I'm worried about this.
See what you got to say. Number one, what are the most common political mistakes you see new or first-time fire chiefs make?
Well, going back to being open-minded, thinking that, well, I'm the fire chief. This is how it's going to be. This is how we're going to do it. And not being open to those partnerships or like that mutual respect. You want to get respect as the fire chief, of course, but the only way that you're going to get it is if you give it as well. You can't expect your elected officials to always agree with you 100% of the time.
Very good. How should a fire chief approach a town board or council that doesn't understand the fire service or the fire service culture or how they operate?
So again, that's, going to the meetings. The first thing is looking professional, or what I say earlier, presentable. I think you changed it to professional. But, looking professional and educating them on why it is what you do, taking their questions and offering up that two-way communication, depending on how you're structured. It may have to come from or through your town manager to you, or maybe they can contact you direct, but open up your doors, invite them to the firehouse, let them meet your people, talk to them and show them that you're also a person. Make sure that you reiterate, look, I live here too. I'm raising a family here. My kids go to school here. Give them that, kind of human element to it, just besides that one-on-one professional relationship.
Here's a good one. Ready?
Boy. I'm ready.
How can a chief disagree with political leadership without damaging their long-term trust or their long-term relationship?
Well, I've been the victim of this many times, and it took me a long time to finally learn how to handle it correctly. Because again, type A personality, right? Ego driven. We're the fire service. I'm the chief. I know what I'm doing. You can't tell me what to do. Sometimes you have to take the hits, and you have to understand that there are just some hills you're not going to die on. And you have to prioritize that. If you want to pick and choose, if you want to pick a fight every time, you're not going to win, and it's only going to be a detriment to your department and yourself. So you have to kind of pick and choose those battles, and sometimes just take the hit. Sometimes let them do it. Just let it roll off your back. Hopefully you've built a pretty decent relationship that you have that one-on-one, and it's able to go both ways. But if, hey, they don't agree with you, or they point out your fault, or whatever it may be, maybe you could follow up with them then. Maybe some one-on-one, not in that public forum. Give them that one-on-one. It's amazing. Politicians a lot of times change their tune when you're talking to them one-on-one. When they're sitting up there at the dais with everybody supporting them in front of the microphone, they almost become different people. Where you get them one-on-one, they're a different person a lot of times. I've found that out. So, hey, take the hit, especially in a public forum. Don't start an argument. Just not the hill you're going to die on, and then follow up with them. Hey, what's the deal? What can I do for you? What can I explain to you? Or what can I do better?
Interesting. Here's one that I thought of earlier and I forgot to ask, and I'm glad a listener had this, so I added it. How transparent should a chief be with their own membership about any political pressure that maybe they're getting behind the scenes? Should a chief be bitching to the troops, or how should they handle that pressure?
So, all right. So I'll tell you, I've got just from I think my own experience would be good for this. Typically who I vent to is one of the police chiefs that I'm pretty good buddies with. We kind of vent to each other because I don't want it to filter down, right? We don't want the BS to go down. I want to be that buffer between my elected officials and my fire department. I don't want my people to have to worry about what they're doing or what they're saying or what's going on. Do I clue people in on some things? Of course I do. Or do I talk about some things? Of course I do. But if it really gets into the weeds about certain things, I try to be that buffer. And, like you talked earlier about networking and my group of peers and my friends, and even like I said, the one local police chief, because a lot of times we deal with the same politics. I vent to him, he vents to me, but I want to try to be that buffer. I don't want it to go down if it doesn't have to.
Yeah. What's the one thing you wish every town supervisor or town mayor or town leader, what's the one thing you wish any of them understood about being a fire chief?
All right. I wouldn't even say about being a fire chief. Can I say about a fire department?
Sure.
Just as a whole?
Yeah. Again, we get back to those misconceptions. What do you wish they knew?
Right. So there's a great article, and it's written by a gentleman by the name of Eric Saylors, Saylors. He's a fire chief in California. I think he had worked for SAC Metro or San Jose. This article came out years ago, and it's called "Fire Departments Are Not Businesses, They're Critical Infrastructure." It's an awesome article. I've actually shared it with my elected officials. When I get new elected officials on the board, I actually put that in their welcome packet, about the department, but I throw that article in there. And
I'm going to stop you right there and have you share it with me if you don't mind.
I will share it. Yeah.
I'll share it on my social media.
If you just Google Eric Saylors and fire departments are not businesses that are critical infrastructure. So the premise for that article is, and we've all heard elected officials say, you need to run your fire department like it's a business, right? We've heard people say that.
Oh yeah, hear that a lot. Yeah.
He points the Chief Saylors points it out we're not a business though. If the dollar store in Snyder, New York closes down tomorrow, guess what? Family Dollar's moving in the next day. Because we have dollar stores all over God's creation down here. But if the fire department shuts down, what's going to happen next? We are a critical infrastructure. We are a huge part of every community, and it's outside of the call response realm. We like my department, we're having lunch with the kids at the elementary school tomorrow. We gave a kid a ride to school the other day in the fire truck. Our open house, the community, we adopt the family every year at Christmas time from the community to buy presents for. We love our community. We love who supports us. We love doing this. We love giving back. I think a lot of elected officials don't understand that about their fire departments, and especially on the volunteer side, because you're volunteering for where you live. Career guys, yeah, you could live here, but volunteer and work here. But volunteers, you typically volunteer where you live, and that's your family, that's your neighbors, that's your friends. I don't think a lot of them really understand, that we are that critical infrastructure in a town. If we go away, who's going to do all this? Who's going to take over all this? We can't be replaced that easy.
Very good. Very good. You did pretty good there. Fight shooting from the hip. That was good.
Well, it's not too bad, I guess.
You've been doing it for a bit.
I actually,
Sounds
you know what? I much rather prefer getting that, because if I have too much time to think on something, it never comes out good.
So can a chief really serve the public without being political?
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you keep your agency and your service delivery at the forefront. As long as you don't got to be best friends with your politicians. You don't got to dive into what they do. You have to have mutual respect. Give them answers when they ask questions. Don't hold back. Be truthful. But as long as when you're making decisions, you're doing it for what's best for your agency and what's best for your residents. That's the biggest thing. Don't lose sight of where you came from. I am blessed and fortunate to be in the position I'm in. I don't count my lucky stars. Like I'm fortunate. I really am. And I don't want to give up this position. I love the department I work for, and I only want to see it succeed. So as long as I continue to walk that fine line and just, always remember that my fire department comes first, being a firefighter comes first, taking care of our residents comes first. Let the political side stay over there. We'll stay over here, but we'll mesh in the middle to do what's right and get it done.
Yeah. And just like you have to do in your local department, you got to build relationships. Build those relationships.
Yeah.
Chief Commissioner Jared Renshaw, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. Are there any last minute pointers or tips or pieces of information that you want to pass on to the listeners?
Yeah. So the only thing I have left is, and I got a quick story for you on this. I was doing this class at New York State Chiefs a couple of years ago, my politics class. And Dr. Dennis O'Neill was actually in the class. He was only there for about 30, 35 minutes. He left. I guess he thought it was boring. No, he left and went to another class. I saw him later on the floor, and we started to talk about the class. Because, of course, hey, you see him in your class, and it's like, wow, this is, I was very honored that he even wanted to take time to sit and listen to me babble on about local politics and being a fire chief with local politics. But he sat in on there. We started to talk about just the political side of things. And, he said something that really still sticks with me to this day is that, hey, you're picking up the torch from Hal Bruno. And, everything with, Hal Bruno was, down in the Maryland, DC metro area. He had a monthly column, with different magazines talking about politics and, that political landscape. And it kind of went away, after he had passed away or stopped writing after he passed away. Nobody was really picking it up. And I only started to write about it just because of what I work with on a regular basis and passing the knowledge. But, if I didn't have the type of department I'm in now, I don't know how I really would have dealt with it throughout my career. How if I go somewhere else, what it's, learning and really taking the time to learn about local politics and how it works, how it plays out, ordinances and agendas. You have to learn those things. Yeah, you can learn everything operationally about your apparatus and your response area, but you really have to take the time as a fire chief to kind of learn those little nuances on how your local government works and why they do the things they do, how they do the things they do. What is the job of your town manager? What is, even on the police and public works side, you don't have to learn how to be a cop or learn how to be a public works employee, but get an understanding of how their departments operate as well. Because you're all one unit, right? We're all there to serve the people in a different shape, way, and form. But we're all one. And, you have to kind of have that full understanding of that local government on kind of what goes on.
And if any of the listeners wanted to talk to you more about this, I know you have presentations, you have articles, you've written about it, and I'm sure there's questions that people may have for you.
Yeah.
What's the best way to get a hold of you, Chief?
So, you can look me up on Facebook, of course, Jared Renshaw, JaredRenshaw. And I can even give you my email. So it's JaredRenshaw at Western Berks with an S fire.org. That's my work email. Yep. Western Berks. BE.
BE.
Bravo Echo. Yeah.
Yes.
So Jared.Renshaw at westernberksfire.org.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been enlightening. A lot of good information to digest. Um, Again, the importance of networking, getting out of your bubble, sizing up the political leaders in your town, getting to know them before you even maybe need something. Um, a lot to digest and a lot of good information. So thank you so much for
No,
coming
thank
on.
you, Tom. I appreciate you having me again. This is such a important topic that is often overlooked, and none of the fire officer classes really prepare you for that. So
No.
it's something you got to kind of learn on your own.
Yeah. And you definitely are the next Hale Bruno because
No, and I don't know. I've
uh,
read some of his. I can't compete with that. That stuff is way that's way beyond me. So
and you've heard me say this before, and I know you're in full agreement. If you consider yourself a professional firefighter, then you know the people who help build and mold our industry, living or deceased. And Hale Bruno is one of those names that
yep,
you should add
yep,
to your list of must knows. So,
yep.
um, again, Chief Commissioner Jared Renshaw, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to my listeners again for continuing this conversation that we have every month or so, talking about the professional culture and building a professional image and maintaining that image and building a great reputation in our hometown volunteer fire department. If anybody wants to reach out to me, feel free at tamerrill63 at AOL.com. Check me out on my Facebook page, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Again, my website, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department.com or thepvfd.com. All my listings are there of where I'm going to be. My book sale, everything's on there. You can reach out anytime because I respond to everybody who contacts me. So thanks again. My next show will be scheduled the week of April 21st, which is FDIC week. Figure out how we're going to do that. But one thing's for sure is I guarantee you we will continue having this conversation, this professional conversation. So thanks for listening in, folks. Remember, true professionalism is never defined by a paycheck, and your residents are owed professional service that's delivered by professional firefighters representing a professional organization. Take care, folks.